I mean, I think there are a few shocking things that came up, some that we were aware of before, but which were highlighted at the inquest. The first one was that a phenomenon that can kill up to 1 in 150 epilepsy sufferers, though those still having regular seizures, isn't even taught in medical training. I think that's shocking. And so I think we'd like to see that change. Yeah, the second really shocking thing is that a clinician might assume that a patient has actually been told about SUDEP without referring to notes or without even thinking it might be worth mentioning again anyway. I think that's quite shocking. So we'd like to see that become part of the natural process, which obviously if they followed your guidelines, that you've laid down or suggested, that would happen. So I guess it's all about more awareness of SUDEP and how serious the consequences can be, which still I think just doesn't penetrate.
No, I mean, it's quite incredible. I mean, we have to refer back to our experience, obviously, and I do think it was pretty negligent what happened, that he let Amber walk out the door, kind of knowing that she wasn't, her medication needed to be increased. He didn't ask her why, why she didn't want to take it. And of course, she's totally unaware of SUDEP. And they can say, oh, we presume conversations will have taken place about SUDEP. We assume. Well, then if they assume, surely that then it's okay to say at that point, well, you know about SUDEP, so you really need to be increasing your medication, because that's like one of the biggest risks. After the inquest, another mum, I think it was Henrietta Marriage, said that 2 years before her son died of SUDEP, this was for another reason, because he couldn't get hold of his medication. It was at the same trust, and they actually said to her they were going to change the way they dealt with SUDEP, or they were going to kind of bring out new procedures and guidelines and stuff. Yet 2 years later, Amber walks out of that consultation without knowing about SUDEP, and they have form. They knew about this before. Now, I wish I'd known this, because at the inquest I would have raised this, because Guy's and St Thomas's, they'd already had a SUDEP death. They already should be, they should have already had procedures in place. Therefore, Amber should definitely have been told about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
But
that's particularly quite scary because, it seems that awareness of SUDEP is very limited throughout the health service. But there's a trust that's had a similar incident and has failed to put in place effective guidelines. Somebody may have written a memo or put a poster up or done something, but clearly it's not working. SUDEP does not have priority even not just in the health service, but even amongst epilepsy patients.
yeah, I mean, I think that SUDEP Action would like to have a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with West Streeting. And I think the key thing is that they've offered to work with the health department. You have such a vast amount of experience in this, and it makes sense for SUDEP to be able to work alongside them to ensure all these guidelines and clinicians and consultants are actually putting this in place. I mean, just the fact that you've developed an app, SUDEP Action have developed an Epsimon, isn't it? And that could have been really helpful to Amber or to me, because I could have monitored her seizures. It would have provided a really good solid background on what was going on and what her risk factors were, as well as lots of information on it.
Yeah.
But we didn't know about it, and that just seems completely crazy when it's been out there and we could have known about it.
No one in the health service, not even neurologists, are actually taught, or training people who are training with that speciality are not taught about the risks of SUDEP. They've not even heard of it. We'd never heard of it. That's the story we get back from anyone who's in contact with us, who's in a similar situation. Nobody ever told us. I think there's probably have one instance of someone who said, well, I did know about it, but it's just few and far between. So the number, if you ask, what do you really want out of this? I think, from the ground up, making sure that SUDEP is included in medical training, not just for those who are interested in neurology, but right across the board. Epilepsy is not that uncommon, and this is the most common cause of death of epilepsy sufferers. So why on earth would it not be in medical training?
Because in any other sort of condition or illness, no clinicians or consultants kind of don't put the facts before you, do they? They just don't. So I don't understand in epilepsy why they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that might come back to this ridiculous, difficult conversation comment that was made. We like to talk about it because it's a difficult conversation. I can understand that with kids. You wouldn't want to terrify a 10-year-old that's recently been diagnosed with epilepsy that this could suddenly happen to them. But certainly the parents should be educated in that case. And, as an epilepsy sufferer approaches adulthood, and we know from our own experience, getting youngsters to accept their condition and take it seriously is a challenge. But when they approach adulthood, they need to know about that risk. And if we'd known about the risk of SUDEP, we would have made sure that Amber had known about it, which she didn't, because we didn't, because nobody told us. In, what was it, 13 years, nobody told us, despite the fact she displayed all the symptoms of someone who was particularly at risk.
I mean, if you suffer from epilepsy, it's, as we knew from Amber, it's a horrible thing. It is a horrible condition to have. It's very scary, and I think it comes with a whole stigma that people think you're a freak or whatever. And it should be normalized. So it would help if it just became like a normal thing, like diabetes is, or do you know what I mean? It's just another condition, but not to be scared of. I just still feel things could have been different. What we would have done, we would have known that we'd done everything, but to think there'd been a massive admission of something that goes on within this, and we've been in the system for 10 years plus, is crazy.
And we got used to living with Amber and her epilepsy, and having to deal with seizures and kind of making sure that she was safe and that someone was looking out for her wherever. She had this app on her phone, so we always knew where she was, and we wouldn't use it unless we were worried. We were careful, but I don't think if we'd known about SUDEP, we would certainly have insisted her medication was increased.
I think that was the only thing about the inquest that I felt upset about was when the coroner kind of said it's, he did the prevention of death, but the causation, I think you call it. And he just said, if she'd been told about SUDEP, I can't say whether probably she would have increased her medication.
Yeah.
And I just sat there and I thought, no, that is so wrong, because I am going to write to him about this, because we both would have, we did her pills.
I think the problem with an inquest is, and I thought the coroner was really good and really thorough, but he has to work to certain guidelines, and he can't say it was the cause of death.
So I guess the main outcome of this, we would hope, is that that SUDEP Action get to work alongside ministers or the healthcare to be able to put what needs to be put in place regarding SUDEP. So we have like a first-hand input in seeing and implementing the changes.
And not just paying lip service to the checklist, for example.